All right, so I'm going to connect a few pieces of evidence together, and then I will let you guys make up your own minds about what to believe and what to not believe. But first, we have to start with some facts. Israel created Hamas. Now, I'm going to post links to all of the evidence in the description so you can read through all this stuff yourself, but let's watch this video together.
The Palestinian militant group Hamas has carried out brutal acts of terror against Israeli civilians, and Israeli and American leaders are always keen to tell us how dangerous and evil Hamas is.
The inhumanity of Hamas.
I have no sympathy for Hamas.
That keep shelling Israel with thousands of rockets and mortar shells.
But what if I told you that Israel helped create Hamas? Officially, Hamas, which is the acronym for an Arabic phrase meaning Islamic Resistance Movement, was founded in 1987, at the start of the first Palestinian Intifada, or uprising, against the Israeli occupation. But its roots were planted much earlier. The Hamas founder Sheikh Ahmed Yassin was a half-blind, disabled Palestinian cleric and member of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood had been repressed by the Egyptians in Gaza prior to 1967, but once the Israelis invaded and occupied the Strip, they didn't just turn a blind eye to these Islamists, they encouraged them. See, the Israelis, especially right-wing Israelis, wanted to undermine the power of the dominant Palestinian political force at that time, the nationalist PLO, at the heart of which was the secular Fatah party of Yasser Arafat, their bête noire.
بغصن الزيتون في يدي وببندقية الثائر في يدي.
By empowering Sheikh Yassin and the Muslim Brotherhood, Israeli leaders thought they could divide and rule the occupied Palestinians, play them off against each other, secular nationalists against religious Islamists. So in 1978, when Yassin wanted to officially register his Islamic Association, which was basically the precursor to Hamas, the Israelis were only too keen to help. Yassin built and grew a network of Islamist social institutions across Gaza, including schools and clubs and mosques, and Israel helped fund some of those projects. Most American politicians have no clue about any of this, although the former Republican Congressman Ron Paul once made this point on the floor of the House.
Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat.
Arafat himself told an Italian newspaper, quote, Hamas is a creature of Israel. He even claimed that former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin admitted as much to him, calling it a fatal error. Now,
All right. I encourage you guys to go to this video and watch the full thing. The link will be in the description. But let's move on. Now, I'm going to show you a map of Israel. So, this right here is the West Bank. This right here is the Gaza Strip. Okay. Now, this is to the east. Now, the reason why they call this the West Bank, even though it's to the east, is because it's on the west side of the Dead Sea. So it's the West Bank of the Dead Sea. And this right here is the Gaza Strip. Now, the Gaza Strip is where Hamas attacked from. Okay? They attacked from the Gaza Strip. Now, it's a well-known fact that the Gaza Strip is an open-air prison. Now, you may have heard that before. That's because Israel controls all ports of entry into and out of the Gaza Strip, from land, sea, and air. So nothing goes into the Gaza Strip, and nothing comes out of the Gaza Strip without Israel knowing about it. This is incredibly important. Okay, so now this is the Gaza Strip, remember, and this is the West Bank here. Now, there's another very important thing that we need to cover, and that is why, or rather, where was the military during the invasion. When Hamas attacked from the Gaza Strip, where was the military to protect the civilians? Let's find out. Okay, actually, jumping ahead there. Here we go. So I showed a little image of someone. So this man, Benzie Sanders, and we'll get to this image in a second. He addressed this question of where the soldiers were. So he was a former IDF soldier. So I'm going to read this. The question Israelis are all asking is, where were the soldiers yesterday? Why was the IDF seemingly absent while hundreds of Israelis were slaughtered in their homes and on the streets? The unfortunate truth is that they were preoccupied in the West Bank. We send soldiers to secure settler incursions into the Palestinian city of Nablus, to chase Palestinian children. In Hebron, to protect settlers as they carry out pogroms. Settlers demand that Palestinian flags removed from the streets of Hura. Soldiers are sent to do it. Our country decided decades ago that it's willing to forfeit the security of its citizens in our towns and cities in favor of maintaining control over an occupied civilian population of millions, all for the sake of a settler messianic agenda. The idea that we can manage the conflict without ever having solved it is once again collapsing before our eyes. It held up until now because only few dared to challenge it. These heartbreaking events could change that. They must, for all of us between the river and the sea. So, these soldiers were ordered intentionally away from the most likely point of entry near the Gaza Strip and instead relocated to the West Bank to assist, quote unquote, settlers in stealing homes from Palestinian people. Now, let's take a look at that. So Benzie Sanders says again, many people think the Israeli government had no strategy. They did have a strategy. It was to prevent a Palestinian state at all costs, even if that meant bolstering murderous terrorists. This link here says, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas, Netanyahu told his Likud party's Knesset members in March 2019. And here we have the proof. Okay. Now this is the Times of Israel. Not sure if you can see it in the top left here. But this is the Times of Israel. You know, I'll post a link to all this. In fact, I don't think I can easily kind of get it in there, but you'll see it when you click on the link. For years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blown up in our faces. I'm not going to read the entire article. I encourage you to do that. But there are some very interesting things to read here. Hamas was upgraded from a mere terror group to an organization with which Israel held indirect negotiations via Egypt, and one that was allowed to receive infusions of cash from abroad. Let's keep going. Meanwhile, Israel has allowed suitcases holding millions in Qatari cash to enter Gaza through its crossings since 2018. To echo the remarks made by that Israeli soldier, according to various reports, Netanyahu made a similar point at Likud faction meeting in early 2018 when he was quoted as saying that those who oppose a Palestinian state should support the transfer of funds to Gaza, because maintaining the separation between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza would prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. And finally, again, from the Times of Israel, it reported Egypt intelligence official says Israel ignored repeated warnings of something big. Cairo official says Israel focused on West Bank instead of Gaza. Egypt's spy chief said to warn PM of terrible operation. Netanyahu denies it, of course. Now, let's put all the pieces together, all right? The obvious question is, did Netanyahu know an attack was imminent, but allowed it to happen to create a casus belli for war? From my perspective, it seems almost too obvious. As I covered before, Israel controls all entry points into Gaza. They control land, air, and sea routes into Gaza. It's a well-known fact that it's an open-air prison. We say that all the time. So anything goes into Gaza, Israel would know about it. So how did so much money and weapons get into Gaza? Hamas attacked from Gaza. So this is very strange. It seems reasonable that they couldn't merely smuggle in weapons and tons of money into Gaza without Israel knowing about it, and evidently, they knew about it. And in fact, Netanyahu encouraged it. And then we covered the reports of Egypt warning Israel of an imminent attack, but Israel and Netanyahu ignored it. And then there was the lack of a military presence in the region in which Hamas attacked from. The Israeli soldiers stated where the military was, primarily in the West Bank to protect settlers. They were deliberately ordered there, away from the most likely point of an imminent attack. Here's the map again. Hamas was created by Israel, and Netanyahu funded it and encouraged the funding of it. Now, like I said before, it seems almost too obvious. Like it seems like a fool's scheme. And Netanyahu, I don't think he's a very bright guy, but this seems almost like painfully obvious to the point of absurdity. Is Netanyahu just a screw up? Is he a schemer who allowed this to happen? I think it really depends on how things pan out going forward. I think one of the best pieces of evidence is what he plans to do with the prisoners that Hamas has captured. if Netanyahu and the Israeli government as a whole has no interest in negotiating a release of those prisoners and is only interested in destroying Gaza, then I feel that only strengthens the case that this was a deliberate thing where Netanyahu knew that an attack was inevitable and allowed it to happen. And if you've been keeping up on the situation in Palestine, then you would know that things had become exponentially worse, that the repression of Palestinians was intentionally made to be so much worse, that the repression and the treatment, the inhumane treatment, was getting worse and worse. So, assuming that Netanyahu knew that an attack was imminent and chose not to do anything, why would he do this? If we were to assume that that is the case, the reason would be to establish a casus belli, a reason to go to war, and a reason to destroy Gaza, and a reason to make any attempt, any possibility of a two-state solution completely impossible, and to annex Gaza permanently. That would have been the reason, assuming this is a true false flag. Like I said before, I'm still not completely committed to that idea. But I do believe that if Netanyahu is uninterested in negotiating any terms to have captured prisoners released and is only interested in destroying Gaza, I feel that only strengthens the case. But you guys make up your own mind.